So I'm going to be able to make views based on the content types that he was just talking about. So first of all, what is a view? So this is a website I just did, so of course I'm going to show it off because I'm happy. And there's lots of views. Pretty much it's the other building block of websites. You have your content types, which is your nodes, which is like your content, and then you need to display that content. And that's pretty much almost the entire website, right? So here's some views. This is a view of all news content types that are marked with display on homepage. This is a view of all research questions ordered by last update date, so the most recently updated one at the top. Contributions are all response content types in a block instead of on a page view or some sort. And then this, as opposed to what was at the top of the page, which is all news that is flagged for display on homepage, this is all news that has the taxonomy term funding. And that is also displayed in a block. And then you can do some other fancy things. So that's like showing, teasers. But now you can also display tables. So this is just a table of funding content types that display these fields because they are the most obvious. You have recent contributions as another block, and then you can also have links to link to more. You can link to a page from the block that displays an expanded view of what was displayed in the block. All right, so that's pretty much the definition of views. So now should have looked at my notes in the first one. So now let's go over making some views. So here's the default homepage. If you think about it, the default homepage is effectively a view, but it's very rigid in that it lists all of your content types that are flagged for display on homepage in reverse chronological order. Sometimes that's just too rigid. You don't want to have to do that. And then it displays all of them. You can change how many are displayed, but sometimes we want more control. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to remake the home page. So as you saw in the previous CCK one, he had admin menu, which had this little bar on the top. I find that's really difficult. It's a good thing that I changed it because I would have never been able to see it from here. So I'm using DHTML menu, which allows me just to open and close these things and get to what I want. I've been using Drupal since 2004. I'm so used to this navigation menu that it's hard-coded into my brain. So this is much easier for me to think of. So you just go to site building and views. Well, after you enable the module first. And the first thing that it shows you is it shows you all of the kind of default views. These are not real views. These are views that are in the modules, and you can override them. So one thing that is overridden frequently is taxonomy term or something. If you want to change the display of an existing view. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a new one and then make it a homepage. So we can add a view and we can name it. So based on the way that views work, you can create a view, and then in a view you can have multiple displays. So kind of like how we're talking, it's kind of hard to figure out how to organize your content types. Figuring out, okay, this is my design, this is how I want the website to work, and how do I map that to content types and such. That is kind of hard. So the next kind of hard thing about views is figuring out how to group your views into the most best views. The easiest thing is every single time you want to create a view, create a brand new view instead of trying to use displays. But it would be good to try to figure out how to maximize what this view is. So I'm going to be showing you how to group views and displays. So we're going to create effectively just two views, one for desserts and one for reviews. So I'm going to create this one for desserts. I'm just going to call it dessert. And it always has to be a machine-readable name. So if you're going to have if you're going to have two words, you got to use underscores. And then like a description, which is optional. Desserts. And then you can tag by grouping. Like if you have like 10 or 20 views, it can be helpful to categorize them by type so you can get access to them. So you can have a view type. The most common view type that you're going to use is node. In fact, the only other one that I've used here is term. And that was like one case. So like 90% of the time you're going to use node.
Do you care about the X-rays?
Did I put desserts?
I was actually going to say.
Deserts. Oh really? I misspelled it? Oh.
So,
Yeah, I'm a really bad speller.
you realize that the word dessert with 2 S's, it comes from this word. And it's because it's the food that was served while people were clearing out all the tables from the banquet hall back in the Middle Ages.
Oh, it was so funny.
So yeah, they were deserting the banquet hall and they would serve this thing with dessert.
So yes, as
spell
you
like
can see, I'm very bad with spelling. Spent all of my elementary school with extra spelling classes in one. As you can see.
The only concern I have is whether you're using something that already exists that has the.
Oh no, actually you're not. So in my sustainable theming session before, I was saying be very consistent in your naming types. So this is an example where that could potentially be a big problem, like in theming and stuff. So try to be consistent. Try to make sure you spell things correctly. Try to make sure that like you pick either plural or not plural, and like either one word or nickname. Try to be consistent. But it's not a huge problem. It's just more of a pervasive development problem. But for this case, it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, in a very basic definition, is view equates to how, in other terminology, a page looks like? View equates to how
Yeah,
a
a
page
view,
looks.
it can be a page. So very commonly, it is a page. So what we're going to do is what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make the home page.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, so is the homepage going to consist of 2 views, the desserts and the reviews, or?
Whatever you want it to be.
Okay,
So
okay.
what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a home page that only displays the most recent desserts.
Okay.
There's maybe a clarification. A view is a set of, you're organizing output. So you've put in all of these nodes, and a view allows you to run queries on those nodes and select your output based on whatever criteria you want.
Yes.
So it's for a set of data, the way it's going to be displayed.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not like you
So
are.
like I was showing on like the PD Online site, like it's the content type news tagged with display on homepage.
Thank you. I know.
The visual query builder.
We're not to confuse
Yes.
with the page maker.
Visual query
Right.
builder.
Right.
Right.
Hi. Alright, so these are all the things. So defaults. So as I said before, you can create more displays. So the very first thing that you're going to be setting up is going to be your default view. Every single time you create a new display, it's going to effectively clone your default view. And your default view doesn't really do anything or go anywhere until you create a display. There's all these various settings. I'm going to go over them one by one as I create the different things. So generally when you create a new view, the very first thing you're probably thinking of is, what am I displaying? What are my filters? So I generally go straight to filters, and even though it's way over here. I don't know what other people's workflows are. Because I'm thinking right here, I'm like, okay, homepage, I want all desserts. Okay, that's all I want. So you click on this little plus sign, and then you guys scroll down. I don't know if you noticed it went over here. And then, so right underneath this, so here, let me hit cancel, and let's do this again. I have down here, now it's giving me an error. Because it's field saying, no, go to that. So there's nothing down there, but when I click on this little plus sign, something goes down there. So this is also going over the user interface. It's a little quirky. But this is such a hard user interface to master. So it's understandable that it's quirky. So now it's giving me every single thing that I can use in the entire system. The larger the website, the larger it gets. And this is a pretty small website. So you imagine how long this list is for PD Online. It's gargantuan. So luckily it has these little filters so you can narrow it down. So I want the content type as a filter. So that is considered part of its node information. So you can look through these to try to, really kind of figure out what each of these groups mean. But what I'm looking for is the node type, its content type. So I'm going to go to node, and this is all the information that is related to a node. So it could be something about its body, something about its comment count, something about its node ID. This is all information, regardless of whether or not it's useful. Like node ID, why would you only want one node? So we're going to go down to type. Updated date, because then you could say only the things that were updated in the last 2 weeks, stuff like that. So we're going to go to type. And we're going to add this. And now it's going to give me more information about what I can pick. Is it not one of? This is really useful if you're thinking of adding new content types later, and you're thinking, well, generally most content types are going to be considered in this view. It's only specific ones that are not. For example, page. Page is usually about me. Generally, you never want that in a list. So you could just say, I never want to show a page. So that's where you go, is not one of page or something. But this is a view where I only want to show desserts. So I hit dessert and I update. And so now I can't see what just happened. So now I have to scroll up. And so every single time you make a change, it's going to be, every single time there's a change that you haven't hit the save button yet, it's going to be highlighted in yellow. It's kind of hard to see here. But it's going to be bold and in yellow. So that means that it's something new that I just did. So that can help if you're scrolling up and down a lot when doing this interface. So now I have my node. So now I know that I'm going to have this with only displaying desserts. Next thing you need is a sort criteria. How do you want to sort this? So now you can add a sort criteria. You hit the plus button. And you go, okay, well, I want it to be the most recent first. The information about its posted date is under node. And you find post date. Okay, great. I'm going to add it. And you can select granularity, ascending, descending. Ascending is always default, but ascending is not usually what you ever want for almost any of these date type views. Because generally you want the most recent first. So if you think about it, it's the largest stuff going down. So descending would be the most recent date going down. So whenever you want to do a date, most recent first, we're going to have the sort be descending. And then you can update. Alright, so now I have sort criteria. And then you go, wait a minute, what if there's something that I want to always be at the top of the list? Well, there's a sticky option on node types. This is default. All content types can have sticky. It's kind of like displaying a home page. So you can say, oh, I should add in the sticky. And now, I've had my client complain about this, because I always forget to put in the sticky. And then my client clicks sticky, and then he goes, it doesn't work! And I'm like, oh, because I forgot to put it in. Sorry. So don't forget to put in sticky. So, again, you want descending because it's 1 or 0. 1 is it's sticky, 0 is it's not sticky, so you want descending. So now it's like that. But then I look at it and I go, oh, well, what's the first thing it's going to do? First thing it's going to do, it goes through the order before, for how it's going to be considering this. So the first thing it's going to do is look at the post date. Then it's going to consider sticky. No, you wanted to consider sticky first so that all the stickies are first, and then reorder from down there. So now I've got to reorder these fields. So this little button right here has 2 arrows, one going up, one going down, and it says rearrange when you hover over it. So you click on that, and scroll down again, and then you can reorder the fields like this. There's also little delete fields here. I actually use this all the time for deleting fields. If I ever have to delete more than 1 field from any of these things, which happens a lot when you're building new ones, you start doing something and you go, nah, and I delete by 5. I use this interface to delete multiple fields. It's very useful. So then you can reorder them by just dragging and dropping, and then update. And now sticky's at the top.
So when you put sticky, what is sticky? What are you deciding?
Sticky is a term that I believe came from forum posts. So in a forum, like you have all your posts, and every single time you make a new comment, it puts that thread basically at the top of that forum. So what the forum administrator started doing is calling something sticky, meaning it'll always be at the top, no matter what. So even though it hasn't been updated in a year, everything else is updated almost every day, it's always going to be at the top of the list. So sticky, I think that term sticky is just legacy from forums.
Just for example.
And this is just a generic description is what you're putting on the top?
Well, for example, like if in a forum post, usually the person running the forum has a description of things that are appropriate to post and stuff like that. And so they want that to be the first thing in the forum, no matter how recent something else is posted. So in order to get that always to be at the top of the list, they make it sticky.
Right. And every Drupal node by default has a flag marked sticky. There it is.
So I just went to create a dessert, node add dessert. At the bottom is publishing options, and you have a sticky option. And the only thing, the sticky is just 0 or 1. If it's 1, then it's considered sticky. If it's 0, then it's not considered sticky. So it's just on or off.
What is it pushing on or off?
So this node, if you create any new node, a new dessert, a new review, anything, you can set it to be sticky. And then Drupal by default on the home page will pay attention to this and will say on the home page, any node that's been marked sticky will appear at the top all the time. And then all the other nodes will be below. But that's not by default happening in views. Views doesn't pay attention to that piece of information on a node by default. You have to actually explicitly teach it to pay attention to sticky or not. So it's like just a checkbox that is on every single node on the site, and it's either on or off. And you can interpret it however you want, actually. Right now it's being used to sort sticky posts always to the top, which is what it was designed for and why it's named sticky. But technically you could use it for something else. It would be a very bad idea, but you could use it for something else.
Yeah.
Views overrides it?
Views overrides the default behavior of sticky has almost no default behavior. The only real one I know of is that on the home page it will list sticky things first and then everything else.
And that's only because the query that generates the homepage specifically says to put sticky at the top. So when I'm regenerating this, I have to regenerate all of these little things, which means even putting the sticky. And as I said, I forget it a lot. My client's like, what? Why doesn't this work? Because I forgot to put it in. So yeah, when you're building these views, you're doing it from scratch. You got to put in everything else. Speaking of another thing, I don't think this is as important with views 2, but it was really important for views 1, is you have to put in whether or not it's published.
Oh yeah.
So I think now views 2 pays attention to access control, so it won't display things that a user can't access. But it used to be that it couldn't. So you actually had to put in those queries yourself to make sure that the user had access. So you make sure that the node is published. Or if you want your administrator to be able to see it, you can put publisher admin. Let's just say that your administrators want to see exactly what general user sees. So you have to make sure that it's published.
Isn't this very convenient compared to what it used to be? Because earlier you had to play with permissions to be visible or not.
Yeah, exactly. So now it's much better. So now, like for example, like I use workflow a lot to control publishing workflow, and it used to be much more of a pain because I'd have to put in the workflow options and make sure it's like yes, make sure that put it in. But now it's paying attention to access control. So you can put in no publish yet, and then you can reorder. I generally put like I don't know if there's any reason for this, but I always put publish at the top. Anyways. Alright, so now we are starting to build a view. And so this is a lot of it. Oh, so another thing that you want to make sure, well, no, I'll show that later. Alright, so now you want to create a display for this. Generally, it's going to be a page or a block. So now I'm going to add a display. And now I have to associate something with the display. Now it's complaining more. I forgot about that one. I'll show you in a minute. All right. So one of the things it's complaining to me about is display page uses path, but the path is undefined. You gotta tell display pages the path. And so this is how you can make a URL display certain content that you want. So path settings are here. It only appears for the page display type. So you go to path, and let's call this desserts. So I spelled it right last night. My brain just doesn't remember. And now it's always going to show up as soon as I get saved for desserts. So let's fix this other bug. So now it's also complaining to me that it uses fields, but they're none defined for it. So that's why when I go down here, you can also preview. Nothing's happening because of this error. So that's because of here. So you can have style types. And then the row style depends on what your style is. So unformatted is just that, it's just, you know, as they call it, river news. You can have a grid, that was the news on the homepage of PD Online. Here, I might as well split it up. So this is a grid. You can have an HTML list, and those are the blocks that I have here. So these are actually lists where I just don't put the bullets in. And then you can have a table, like I have here. This is a table. But generally, if you just want to show content, so this is like unformatted. It's just pretty much showing view. So that's that. So now the row style for the unformatted style is you can have fields or nodes. We're going to display nodes. I'm going to say it's a teaser, and I'm going to take out the links. And now stop complaining to me, and now the preview actually works. So you can change the display. So if you have multiple displays, you can change display. And so this is what the homepage is going to be when I put it there. All right. So now let's save. Now I have.
I was going to ask something. When do you hit that save button? Because I always find myself saying, do I need to hit that button now before I accidentally lose all this work?
I hit the save button whenever the display at the bottom gives me what I want.
All right, that seems like fun.
When I've done a couple things and it looks right, I'm like, all right, save.
It doesn't technically hurt to save it early, I believe, right?
Well, the only thing is that it resets. So if you have lots of displays, then it takes you away from the display that you're working on, puts you back to default. So then you've got to change things around. So.
And I've noticed, I think, that when you hit the save, like before you hit the save button, if you actually accidentally leave the page, then you come back, it still says you need to save this page. So it saved your work, but it hasn't implemented it yet. I mean, I don't know, is that?
Yeah, it might be putting it into your session.
Use caches, it's all.
Yeah.
I think it's a
Have
cache.
to refresh the browser to show it
Yeah.
away from the page.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Because
probably
we have
just
to
a nice
refresh the
little
browser.
feature just in case that the views model will put in.
Yeah,
All right, so I just made this homepage view, and of course it's not on the homepage. Why not? Well, you gotta tell it to. So you go over to site configuration and site information. Scroll all the way down, and this is where you define what your homepage is. So right now it's saying that it's node, and that's the default thing. Node is just a view that is, all nodes marked display and homepage by reverse chronological order. So I'm going to tell this, I'm going to give this URL that I just put in. So this is an instance where spelling's important. If I misspell this is what's up. So now I'm going to save this and go back to the homepage. And now it's only showing the desserts. But it's just showing a couple of them. Why? Oh, because I haven't put in the pager. So by default, I don't know why it says no pager.
still don't know either.
Yeah, I think it's just a theming issue. I think it just gives it a different class, so then maybe if you do want 2 pages, then it'll help you out that way.
If I flipped every control on this page, I'd be up for the rest of my life. There are a lot of combinations.
So now I can say update, and so now I have a pager, and then I can go back to the home page.
Hey Kathleen,
Yes.
on that configuration page, what is Ajax? It says Ajax.
What is which?
Use
Basic
Ajax.
settings, use Ajax.
Use Ajax. I use that for like if you're changing things, like if you're using exposed filters or table view.
And paging.
And paging?
Nice.
Oh, I guess I'd also use it for paging. I think it's really good for blocks, for example.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have like a couple pages in a block,
I dare you to turn it on.
turn it on.
That option
Okay,
can
let's turn
cause
it on and see
problems.
what happens.
That option isn't very SEO friendly though.
I
Yeah,
can
it's probably
imagine.
not SEO friendly at all.
Man,
I don't know.
What's SEO?
Search engine optimization.
Thank you.
And,
Because they won't index,
Oh, I
they won't
see.
follow those Ajax calls back, so all that content is hidden.
Yeah. So you don't actually want to use that for your home page.
I was saying it's most useful for like a block.
Right.
Okay, let's see what's gonna happen.
You
Whoa.
can barely tell it worked. Because it's so low.
That was kinda cool.
It only changes the stuff in the listing, it doesn't change the rest of the page, so it only
Yeah.
reloads. I mean, it's hard to tell on the whole page, because like, what's the point? It breaks your SEO and it doesn't give you anything, but it's cool. But it is
Yeah,
cool,
it's cool.
and for blocks, it's super cool.
Alright,
Spoken like a true geek.
That's right.
When in doubt, add it in.
okay, so another thing that you want is like, especially when you're building multiple pages, you want a link, like in your primary links or something like that. So let's say that we want to have a link to the home page in our primary links. So you go over to your display page, and then see how it says no menu? You give it a menu. There's a couple different options. Normal menu, entry, menu tab, and default menu tab. I'll show you menu tabs hopefully at time, although I'm running out, I actually can't. And default menu entry. Default menu entry. So I give it a title, and so even though this is called desserts, I'm going to call it home because that's what I wanted to say in the primary links. View the most recent dessert. And I'm going to put it in my primary link.
That was interesting. Baldwin.
Yes. Okay, no more resolution.
Maybe that's why it was so dim.
Session smoking.
I feel like
So, I mean, we can break into small groups, and I have another copy of the site. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
tell someone that just happened, because the next presenter is doomed.
Yeah.
I don't think the fan
All
is.
right. Well, does anyone have any questions I can explain verbally?
Never let me put your laptop into my projector ever.
All right. But you raise your hand first. Go ahead.
When you created a view and then you said, okay, I'm going to display that as the home page, I think you've covered this before about what takes precedent over views, but if you have a node and you say publish to home page, that still holds, right?
No, that's again same thing with sticky. So if
Okay.
I want publish the homepage to work, I gotta put it in my sorting order,
Okay.
and also my filtering. If I only want publish the homepage to show up, I gotta put it in my filter as well to only display promote to homepage. So you gotta really rebuild it from scratch.
So the page that you showed us that you created for the company,
PDI?
can you kind of, I don't know if there's tracking here, but,
Yeah, there's not.
okay. The question I had was, the blocks,
So
so
what
it
about?
looks like you had various blocks on the page that were done in views. So I'm just trying to understand
So view is
that versus what you just created. So if you went through that page and said, okay, that was a block, this is a block.
Oh, how did I design the page and putting all those pieces together?
Well, what's the difference between page and
Actually,
view?
every single blocks here.
So the blocks are within the views?
And each
The
block
views
is-
within the block. Oh, views are within the block.
So you create a view for each block, and then you put the blocks on the page to create the whole page.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a way of thinking of views is it's like a formula to select your data. And so you make that formula right within the default setup. You say, okay, this is the formula. I want to select these nodes and put them in this order. And I want to, just show, these fields of these different data sets. And then once you have the formula set up, then you have to figure out how you're going to display them. So then that's when you create a page view or a block view, right? So you create a page, and you can give that page a path and blah, blah, blah. So then you're saying, I'm going to map this formula to this page, and people will see it as, this list of nodes. And that you can set up all the formats. You can also say, I'm going to take that formula, stick it in this block, and stuff like that. So that's when you're adding displays, you're adding, you're changing how you're looking at it.
So how do you,
Yeah, one of the displays actually is a block. So then it does all the hard work for you, creates the block for you, and all you do is you go to the block management page and you select which region it should appear in.
So if there's a tool that allows you to, like, you pick any template and it says that left, blocks and right blocks and all that, it's kind of dotted line blocks. So you can project or display views into different blocks. So there's a way to hook them together?
Yeah, there's...
It's another display type. Like, remember how I created the display page?
Yeah.
One of the other displays was block.
Yeah, I saw that.
And as soon as you do that, it puts a new block in your block management page. So
Oh,
it's
I
just
get-
like a block.
I
any
see
other
it, I get
place.
it. And then you can decide whether it's left, right, or what, and it just put
And
it,
the visibility settings, access control
Correct.
settings, all
Like
of
any
that.
other block.
Like any other block. So it creates the block
so
for you.
it just names it? I
Sorry, we're sorting out projectors.
So does the theme determine where blocks can be, like left
Yes.
sidebar, right?
So I have, in this site, I have the header region. I created this custom region here, and then I have this bar, and then, so that's pretty much how my template looks. And I can pick and choose which region I'm going to put all these things in.
so it has to fit within the blocks of a theme that you decide what you start with, right? Or you can create a whole new area of the block.
A theme has regions?
Yes.
Is that what I'm understanding? You can create a custom region within some themes.
You can create a custom region in anything,
In
as
any-
long as you, okay, so the like this is kind of getting themey. But a region is defined by where it is in the HTML under page.tpl,
Right.
and then you also have to make an entry for it in your themes.info file. And then there it goes, and it'll work. The presentation of it is your CSS.
I'm studying. Thank you.
Yes?
I know this is a question, but I'm foggy on arguments and views. Were you going to talk about that?
I actually wasn't going to, but especially when she mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, totally. So PD Online is using that because we have comments, which is kind of like the reviews, which is of the same level of a node. Causes problems. Lots of problems. This was a hard problem to solve. So what I did is I created a view that filters only responses, and then I had an argument. So that one of the options, like in that middle column, was argument. So you select the field to be the argument. So I selected the node reference field as the argument. And then I embedded the view into the node. It is into the node's template. It's really not ideal to do it that way. In a couple months, it'll be a lot easier. It's always a couple months away. In a couple months, you're going to be able to attach a view to something else. So you can attach a view to a node.
Isn't there a display option now that says attach?
You can attach it to another display in the view,
In the same view.
in the same view. So you can't attach it to the node over there. Yep.
In I guess one question I've always had is, when do I create, like, you know, if I have say I'm making a bunch of views sorting by different taxonomy terms, right? So like, you know, I make my one formula, I'm like, oh, I want all of the, a picture gallery, for example. I want all of this image of the drawings this person created and all the paintings, right? I was wondering, like, when do you start creating just a new display, and when would you actually go and create a new view, right? Because I can put, like, you can use the default and have the same formula for everything, and then just change the taxonomy term.
Yep. That would actually probably be easiest.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be easy, less work. I'm just wondering how you think about like that kind of sorting, like what seems the easiest.
Yeah, for me, like right now, I'm thinking more on the level of what will require the less amount of clicking. So in that example, it would be less amount of clicking to create a new display and change the taxonomy term. Another thing would be to try to use arguments instead, so that you could create just one display that changes its content based on argument. So it's a balance between what you want, the work, click, 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 and what you understand. I mean, I know that I did a lot of hard work because I didn't understand arguments for so long. I didn't.
Yeah, I still don't, like, argument is just another, it seems like that's just if you run out of other ways to do things, you can start passing in arguments, essentially. And the argument, I mean, but you have to, once you start using an argument, you have to somehow pass that argument in, which means there's a further amount of
yeah, very frequently the
coding.
argument is passed in through the URL. So let's take taxonomy terms. I mean, it's just one display. So display all the taxonomy terms for all the vocabularies, because the path is taxonomy /term/ID. And so you tell it that that ID is the argument for that page, so that it filters based on whatever that those nodes have an association with that ID.
But it's good to know that, you can do quite a lot without having to deal with arguments.
Oh, and I guess another corollary
Yes,
Corollary.
question.
just like that.
One of the nice things about views is you can have, you can set up tabs. I'm just explaining as
Yeah,
background.
I was gonna go
You
over
can
tabs
set
too.
up like tab menus for your different views. So if you do want to have different, like 3 different galleries, for example, in the menu, the little menu area of the view sheet, you can set up. Oh, I want this to be the parent tab, and these are like children. But a question I had was, say then you want to add, like, in organization of content, you don't necessarily always want a view as one of your tabs. Like, say you want one tab that's the home page of a person, and then there are separate galleries, right? You wouldn't necessarily want. Is there a way to hook up the main menu system with the menus in the views, so you can say, oh, I want now I have these 3 views in these 3 tabs, and I want to add a 4th tab that's actually not a view, it's something else. Like, can you access that in the menu?
Yeah. Yeah, because the way that views is used in the menu system is part of Drupal 4's menu system. So you can actually add a view to an existing set of tabs.
Okay. Using the
That's
default
That's
control.
getting into code.
Oh, you'd have to start coding it.
Yeah, I mean, for views you can attach it. So I have done that. So let's take user. You have 2 tabs by default, view and edit. Or if you enable contact module, contact. I just very simply added another one that says publications. All publications are associated with this user. And that was just using the same views UI. I just said menu, and the path is user/user ID / publications. And it automatically put itself there, because I told it it was a menu tab.
Okay, cool.
So in code, same exact thing. So then when you're coding something special, then you just use the recommended code for that, and then you can hook in and add, so if you have views tabs, and now you want to add in something else that you can't do in views, you just put it there with the code.
Oh, I remember, my specific question was this, calendar. Like,
Calendar.
you know
That's tough.
Google Calendar, you have a calendar, and then you can view an event list,
Yeah.
right? And I've wanted to set that up several times. Like, okay, here's the calendar with all the things, and also I'm just going to show a list of the upcoming events in reverse chronological
They
order.
have to have the same URL path. So you can't just have any arbitrary path associated with a tab. The tab has to be also associated with the URL. So the only reason why I can attach a tab to a user page is because I'm using the same path, which is user/UID/tab name.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only reason why it works. So that might be
Okay,
another problem.
I'll take it offline.
Yeah.
We can talk later.
Any other questions? Sadly, verbal questions? Yeah, I wanted to go over relationships, and I wanted to go over, relationships, just to give you the concept, so you can understand it's there. So let's take his reviews. So I wanted to have a list of reviews that displayed the image of the dessert that was being reviewed. You can do that with relationships. And much like arguments, you just select what the relationship is, and then when you add a field, you can add any field, despite the fact that it's not related to that content type that you are filtering, because then you can associate it with a relationship that it has.
What kind of relationship?
So for that one, it was a node reference. So what you do is you go to relationship, and like you were selecting for what to sort by, what to filter by, you select what your relationship is. So you pick the node reference field to relationship by. Then when you create the data point that you want to display, which is when you'd be using fields instead of nodes, then you would select the desserts image field, and then say that it has an association with that relationship that you had defined, and then it'll automatically display it.
What was the join?
Yes, it's a join.
If you will. What relationship is that?
Oh, and also at the bottom of that page below the preview is the SQL query. If you want to start learning, like just trying to understand these things, just even though you don't understand it, just read it. You're going to pick up on something in your brain. You're going to make some sort of connection. And over time, you're going to start really understanding how these things are. So it'd be great if you just take a look at the query and just see if you make any connections. And eventually, you'll start understanding it, and it'll make development a lot better. Yep.
Well, I just wanted to.
Yeah.
That's a quick question. Can you create your own custom SQL if you know how to do that, and just make a view out of your custom SQL query?
Yes, you can. Not like through that user interface. You can create a module that has your SQL query. You should understand like the Drupal API and try to use it the Drupal way and stuff like that, because the views query is doing things for you that you won't normally think of.
So you
You're gonna miss something.
wouldn't route it through views. You would just make a module that runs that query and dumps the results.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do is if you're willing to go custom modules, you can take an existing view and alter its query. There's a views query alter hook that lets you like take it's like this view, a module that just tweaks views existing SQL and then runs that in the context of the view. And then view will build the initial query for you with all its stuff that you don't have to figure out. You just change your one bit, and then views will run that for you, and it's all cool. That's usually what I've done, as opposed to like rewriting all this stuff that's already there in views.
You can also export views and put them into modules pretty easily. I do that a lot. That allows me to version control views, or version control is getting way beyond that. Yeah. Sure.
I just wanted to share a frustration I've had that may help new people working on views. When you're starting to, like once you've created your default, which is your basic formula for how the pages are going to go, and you start adding different pages to it, when you go to change one of the things you set up in your default for a particular page, in the bottom, like in that bottom section where you're actually changing the thing that you're trying to change, there's a button on the side that says override. And then at the bottom, there's a button that says update and cancel. So if you click the button that says override, I initially thought, oh, override, and I'm done, because I want to override the update. So when you click override, all that does is it tells the views page, that you don't want to use the default, you want to use this particular formula. Right? So you're changing you're changing that little bit.
Yeah, so then update it.
Right. Then you have to then you change it and then you save it. All right, on the bottom, and then you have to save the whole thing. So there's a bunch of things you have to do, and that's if you start to skip the default set. If you say, okay, I want a page, and you don't set up all your default formula before you start adding your page, it can get confusing because you see override and you're like, what do you mean override? Override what? And then, so I think it is, in terms of workflow, it makes the most sense to start, just put all the things you know is going to be in every similar page that you're creating in the view in the default, and then set up these overrides, and then you hit the override and change it.
Yeah, I wanted to go over overrides. That's actually really important. Like, so if you're going to create more than one display, so let's take, for example, that I created a page of reviews. Now I want a block of reviews that shows the most recent reviews. I probably use the same exact view, and I'll have two displays, one page, one block. So I set up my page one, and I have all of my content types and stuff. And now I make a block, and it duplicates the page view. Well, I don't want 10 pages. I don't want pager. All of that stuff. So what you do is you click on like the pager option, and you then click on override, and that says don't use the default way of doing it, because for this display I want it to only display the top 3 with no pager. And override, like for example, if you put any field that's overridden in fields or sort or arguments or relationships, all of those fields will be overridden, and now you're going to have to manually update each one if you want to update one on all of them. So those are a couple things to look at. So look at the user interface. If it is in italics, it's the default. That means that you're editing it for all displays. If it is in non-italics, just normal straight characters, that means that is a setting only for that display. I really wanted to show that to you. The user interface is
For example,
a little bit to get used to.
let's say you only create page, nothing else, no blogs.
Then you don't have to worry about it.
So you would just do everything in default and only after that you create page? Or
Whatever you do, by default, affects the default. So if you want to make an override, you have to make sure that you click override before you click save. I've done that so many times. I've been like, okay, so for a block, I don't want any of these fields. Click, 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 delete, 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 delete. Crap, I just deleted them on all displays.
Yeah,
You gotta hit override.
you also have to be careful because at the bottom, like once you have your default set up and you've created your override, at the bottom of that window it says something about update default. So if you change that formula and you want to do that as an override, and you accidentally click update default, it'll change the default and change all your other pages. So just pay attention to those little buttons and what they say. If it says override, it means it's going to create a new layer that doesn't use the default. If you click update default, it's going to change the default and change everything that's relying on the default. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.